Mr. President, I spent a lot of my childhood in a very small town in Missouri. From the time I was about 3 years old until the 4th grade, I lived in a town called Lebanon, Missouri. And my dad was a life insurance salesman and sold life insurance, in fact, to many of the soldiers at Fort Leonard Wood. And my mother's family had the corner drugstore about a block off Main Street in Lebanon, Missouri. And I have fond and vivid memories of my childhood in Lebanon. And one of them was the trip that I would take whenever I was hanging out down at my family's drugstore. This was my great uncle and great aunt who had raised my mother, so they were like my grandparents. He was the pharmacist, and she ran the lunch counter at the drugstore. And I would go with my great uncle on his run to the post office. We'd walk up 2 blocks, and we would go in the post office. And I remember even how it smelled. I remember how it looked. I remember what happened there, and my memory is that it was a gathering place, that I would have to tug on my great uncle's coat. Let's go, Uncle Tom, let's go, because he would invariably find people at the post office that he needed to visit with. It wasn't a big place, but it was a very important place in Lebanon, Missouri. And I rise today to talk about an amendment that will save that sense of community for dozens and dozens of rural towns in Missouri. I am very aware, as a former auditor and as somebody who spends a lot of time looking at our budgets and trying to figure out the numbers, I am very aware of the crisis we have in terms of fiscal sustainability in our Postal Service. I commend the work of the committee I am lucky to serve on, with Senator Lieberman as the chair and Senator Collins as the ranking, one of the places I think we've maintained strong bipartisanship in the United States Senate. In fact, I think that Senator Lieberman's committee could serve as a role model to other committees on how you work in a bipartisan way. I commend Senator Carper, and I commend many others, and Senator Brown of Massachusetts, and also Senator Merkley, who has worked on this amendment also trying to find a way to save these rural post offices. So I know we got a problem here, but when you look at the numbers, closing rural post offices doesn't help. It's 1%, less than 1% of the budget. It's less than 1% of the amount of savings we need to save out of the postal budget. So in 167 different communities in my state, something that is essential, far beyond the bricks and mortar, to those communities would close, all in the name of less than 1%? That doesn't make sense to me. The strength of our Postal Service has been that it's reliable, that it's affordable, and that it goes to the very last mile. What will we lose in these communities if we shut down these post offices? Senior citizens would lose a place where they can depend on getting their prescription medicines. Many of these communities have no pharmacies. In fact, most of them don't. And they rely on the mail for their drugs. Small business owners would lose a shipping location. The small business owners in these rural communities, they depend on that post office to take packages to and to receive packages from. I think this is a sacrifice we should not make. I think that these post offices are worth fighting to save. When I go home and meet with Missourians, and when I get outside of St. Louis and Kansas City and Springfield and Columbia, almost every single time someone walks up to me and talks about their post office. They feel so strongly that it is the one symbol they have in their community that makes them viable as a community. And I would hate to see them lose it. I believe that we should look at the closures of these post offices as a very last resort. And frankly, to me, it looked knee-jerk, because it didn't even appear to me to be thoughtful. I have not been able to get the Postal Service to even give me the rhyme or reason as to why some of these post offices are closing. And very few of them save a significant amount of dollars. This amendment would impose a 2-year moratorium on rural post office closures to allow the Postal Service to enjoy some of the reforms that have been put in this bill in a very thoughtful and thorough process by Chairman Lieberman and many of his colleagues. And it would say, after 2 years, that there is a specific list of transparent criteria that must be considered before a post office could be closed. First, it would have to ensure that seniors could retain the same access to their prescriptions they receive through the mail, that seniors and those with disabilities would have the same access to postal services they currently do, making sure that small businesses are not financially harmed by a rural post office closure. This is not kicking the can down the road. This is being more thoughtful about preserving a part of the Postal Service that defines it. I am hopeful that this is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. I'm hopeful that this is a rural issue. We all know the last mile is the most expensive. Throughout the history of our country, government has stepped in and done a little more to get services the last mile. No business model in the world works when you've got to take services that last mile down that one road all the way down to a house at the end of the road, sometimes several miles. It didn't work for electricity, so we did things to help with rural electric co-ops. It didn't work for phones, so we did the USF fund to help with phones. It didn't work for broadband, so we stepped in and have done things to assist with broadband. And now we're going to say to these rural communities, the last mile is not as important. These post offices are not as important. We can make do without it. I think that's a big mistake. And I hope that we can save these rural post offices. It's very important to my state, and I want young girls that are growing up in these small communities to have the same warm and fond memories of the local post office that I carry with me every day.